everyone! In this video, my discussion will be on the implementation of the Mandanas Garcia case, otherwise referred to as full devolution, and the salient features of Executive Order No. 138. Just to give you a brief background on the legal basis of the National Tax Allotment, previously known as the Internal Revenue Allotment, or the IRA, under Section 6, Article 10 of the 1987 Constitution, it states that local government units shall have a just share as determined by law in the national taxes which shall be automatically released to them, and that just share of the local government units mandated under the 1987 Constitution was determined by Congress by virtue of Section 284 of the Local Government Code of 1991. Under that same provision of the Code, LGU shall have 40% in the internal revenue taxes based on the collection of the third fiscal year preceding the current fiscal year. But then, Congressman Ermelando Mandanas, now the governor of Batangas, and the late Governor Enrique Garcia of Bataan, filed separate petitions assailing the constitutionality of Section 284 of the LGC. And in 2018, the Supreme Court rendered its ruling on those petitions, which was final and executory in 2019. Essentially, the Supreme Court directed the national government to change the basis of the computation of the just share of LGUs to cover all national taxes, including the collections of customs duties by Bureau of Customs. On this slide, presented graphically is the expansion of the basis of the computation of the IRA shares of LGUs before and after the Mandanas ruling. The left pie chart shows the basis in the computation of the IRA before the Supreme Court ruling. The bigger pie is the national taxes, and a subset of it is the national internal revenue taxes. 40% of the national internal revenue taxes goes to the LGUs as their IRA, and 60% is left to the national government. But after the Mandanas ruling was implemented, as shown in the right pie chart, we can see that the basis of the computation of the IRA is expanded already, from national internal revenue taxes only to all national taxes, which effectively means expansion of resources transferred to the national government. The fiscal impact of the Mandanas ruling is that whatever increase the local government units would receive from the revised computation of the NTA, it will result to a tantamount decrease in the fiscal resources available to the national government. In order to mitigate or soften the blow of the fiscal impact of the Mandanas ruling, the measure that was implemented by the national government upon consultation with the LGUs is the full devolution of functions and services to the local government units on a phased basis. This measure is intended to ensure fiscal sustainability, and we also see it as a measure to strengthen the fiscal autonomy of the LGUs and to put an end in the long withstanding problem of duplication of functions and financing between the national government and the local government units. Now, in order to smoothly implement this full devolution measure, the technical working group initiated by the DBM, together with the DILG, DOF, NEDA, and in consultation with our other partners like the CSC, the DAP, the Office of the President, and with the leagues of local government units, a draft executive order was prepared and eventually submitted to the Office of the President. That draft EO has already been approved by the President and was numbered EO 138, issued on June 1, 2021. In the next slides, I will be presenting the salient features of EO 138. The first salient feature is the delineation of roles and responsibilities between the national government and LGUs. The second is the preparation of the devolution transition plans, both by the national government and the local government units. And then, the creation of a committee on devolution and the establishment of a growth equity fund. Then, we also have the capacity building for LGUs, the specific roles of the LGUs as delineated under the EO, the concomitant requirement to strengthen the planning, investment programming, and budgeting linkage, and institutionalization of a monitoring and evaluation system, and finally, the options for the personnel affected by the devolution. These are the personnel of the national government agencies. Let's discuss the specific provisions of the EO. The EO provides the full devolution of functions, services, and facilities from the national government to the LGUs based on Section 17 of the Local Government Code and other subsequent laws. It is to be reiterated and emphasized that the EO only provides the full devolution of functions and services which have already been devolved to the LGUs under the Local Government Code and other pertinent law. We would also like to underscore or put a stress on the fact that there will be no new or additional functions that are being devolved to the LGUs, but we are sticking to the provisions of the Code and other subsequent laws that assign the LGUs the responsibility of providing certain functions and services. Now, with regard to the covered LGUs, all LGUs, including the barangays, will be covered, and all departments and agencies, instrumentalities of the executive branch with devolved functions are also covered by the EO. With regard to the BARM and the LGUs within their jurisdiction, they should be guided by the Bangsamoro Organic Law or RA 11054 and other relevant laws that may be passed or enacted by the Bangsamoro Parliament. That was clarified in the IRR. Next is the preparation of the devolution transition plans by the NGAs and LGUs. To ensure the smooth implementation of the devolution transition, the NGAs are directed to prepare and implement a DTP. The DTP shall be submitted to the NGAs concerned to the DBM for evaluation and approval within 120 days after the effectivity of the EO. The guidelines for the preparation and submission of the DTP of the NGAs will be prescribed in a joint memorandum circular issued by the DBM and DILG. Essentially, these are the components of the DTP that will be prepared by the NGAs. Number 1. The identification of functions and services which have been devolved or to be devolved and the corresponding LGU level to which they should be devolved based on the expenditure assignment of each LGU level under the Code and other relevant laws. Also included in this phasing or strategy for devolution to the LGUs, taking into consideration the growth strategies, the resources, and capacity based on the experiences and assessment of the NGAs when they were still implementing the functions that will be transferred to the LGUs. Number 2, the definition of standards for the delivery of the devolved services, which should include also the minimum cost, scope, and quality of services that should be complied by the LGUs in the implementation or absorption of the functions that would be transferred to them. Number 3, the strategy for capacity development for the LGUs to enable them to absorb and manage the devolved functions and services, and for the NGAs to assume their steering functions. 4. The framework monitoring and performance assessment of the LGUs, which may include the grant of incentives and imposition of sanctions as authorized under existing laws. Number 5, the organizational effectiveness proposal containing the modifications in the organizational structure and staffing complement of the departments and agencies to strengthen their capacity in assuming the steering functions. On the other hand, on the part of the LGUs, consistent with EO 138 and its IRR, the LGUs shall also prepare their respective DTPs, and the guidelines for the preparation and submission of the DTP will also be prescribed in the JMC issued by the DBM and DILG. Essentially, the LGU DTP will serve as a guide on the monitoring and performance assessment of the LGUs by the NGAs concerned, including the DBM and DILG. Next is the creation of a Committee on Devolution or ComDev, which is composed of the secretaries of the DBM and DILG as co-chairpersons. And the members are the Executive Secretary, the Secretaries of NEDA and DOF, and the Presidents of the Leagues of Provinces, Cities, and Municipalities, and the Liga ng mga Barangay, as well as the Union of Local Authorities of the Philippines, or ULAP. Both the NGAs and LGUs are well represented in this ComDev created under the EO. The DBM serves as the secretariat to the ComDev. Essentially, the main function of the ComDev is to resolve the issues and concerns that may be raised by the NGAs and LGUs in the implementation of the devolution efforts. This is a very good venue to flesh out possible issues and concerns and difficulties or challenges that may arise during the implementation of the devolution. Another significant component of the EO is the establishment of a growth equity fund, which, by the way, is a product of our consultation meetings with the LGUs when we were still presenting the then draft EO. This growth equity fund is intended to address the problem of marginalization, unequal development, high poverty incidence, and disparities in the net fiscal capacities of the LGUs. This growth equity fund shall cover the funding requirements of PPAs of poor, disadvantaged, and lagging LGUs, to gradually enable them to fully and efficiently implement the devolved functions and services pursuant to the Code and other pertinent laws. The specific guidelines on the mechanisms on the release and utilization of the Growth Equity Fund will be prescribed by the Development Budget Coordination Committee to ensure the equitable, performance-based, and time-bound allocation and distribution of the fund to the beneficiary LGUs. The initial amount of the Growth Equity Fund will be proposed by the DBM in the 2022 National Expenditure Program, which will be submitted by the President to the Congress. In view of the devolution of certain functions from the NGAs, a capacity development agenda for the LGUs will be formulated, based on the assessment framework and guidelines to be issued by the LGA, and they shall also be guided by the strategy for CapDev as may be reflected or contained in the NGA DTP. And it should also be in line with the local development trusts and performance goals and objectives of the LGUs. These are the agencies primarily mandated to develop the CapDev framework. For the LGA, they shall institute mechanisms to harmonize all CapDev interventions to ensure the efficient utilization of government resources for capacity building. Now, on the part of the DAP or DAP, they shall continue to strengthen the capacities of LCEs and local leaders and managers. And on the part of the DOF or BLGF, they shall conduct CapDev programs regarding revenue generation and fiscal management. And on the part of the other oversight agencies like the DBM, they will continue to provide technical assistance in the areas of budgeting and expenditure management, as well as procurement. These are the specific roles and responsibilities of the LGUs. Number 1 is the preparation of the LGU Devolution Transition Plan. Number 2 is the preparation of a CapDev agenda. And lastly, the development of a communications plan and strategy, which should be formulated based on the communications plan and strategy prepared by the ComDev. So, as part of the strengthening of the vertical and horizontal linkages across the different levels of government in development planning, investment programming, and budgeting, as well as the reinforcement of a results-based monitoring and evaluation system in the NGAs, the EO also highlights the importance of planning at the regional level and the role of the RDCs in setting the strategic direction for the faster development of the regions, especially those in the lagging areas, and facilitate the alignment of the local development plans and land use plans of the LGUs with the goals, objectives, and targets as prescribed in the updated Philippine Development Plan and the respective Regional Development Plan. To the extent authorized by civil service laws, rules, and regulations, the personnel hired on a permanent basis who may be affected by the devolution will have these options. Number 1, for the affected personnel to transfer to the other units within the department, agency, or GOCC to which they belong. Number 2, they can apply for transfer to the other agencies in the executive branch. Lastly, they can avail of the retirement benefits and separation incentives provided under the EO. Subject to the discretion of the LGUs, these personnel may apply to vacant positions in the LGUs, and if they get hired, their reemployment will be considered as a new entry to the civil service, and they will be subject to the compensation system and salary schedules being implemented by the LGUs that may absorb them. It should also be noted that there will be no forced transfer of NGA personnel to the LGUs. It should be a mutual agreement between the personnel and the LGUs. It should also be emphasized that there will be no involuntary separation, termination, or layoff of NGA personnel affected by the devolution. Now, what will happen to the personnel on a contract of service or a job order basis? For the contractual personnel in the departments or agencies who were hired for the implementation of the devolved functions, we are now setting up a mechanism to identify those who are willing to be absorbed by the LGUs. And we are also studying the possibility of providing the LGUs with this list of contractual personnel from the NGAs so the LGUs can benefit from the experience and technical expertise of these personnel. These are the next steps and ways forward in the implementation of the EO 138. A series of inception workshops with selected NGAs together with the representatives of different leagues of LGUs and member departments of the interagency TWG will be conducted to ensure the strong alignment, synergy, and co-ownership of the goals of the full devolution transition effort among the NGAs and LGUs. We are also targeting the submission of the DTPs by the NGAs to the DBM and the preparation of the LGU DTPs within 2021. There is a timeline for the preparation and submission of the NGA DTPs. The interagency TWG is also geared to develop the framework for performance assessment of devolved functions and strengthen the capacities of the NGAs on the monitoring and coaching function for the LGUs. The capacity building activities for the LGUs will also be done through the LGA, DAP, BLGF, and other NGAs concerned. So, this will be a continuing effort of our department, together with our partner oversight agencies to capacitate the LGUs. Especially next year that we are expecting turnover of administration, there may be a new set of personnel and elected officials after the elections. We will continue to provide capacity building programs for the LGU personnel. This wraps up my presentation. We are excited to assist you with this new challenge as we begin to transition to full devolution, which was, after all, the intent of the Local Government Code of 1991, and that is to empower local government units and enable them to efficiently and effectively provide their services to their constituents. Thank you.